Well, thank you, and good day, everyone. This is Matt Sikes again with Verify. John, thank you for the red carpet treatment there. So today, for this week's session, we're going to get into Webex calling, looking at reports and dashboards that are going to be more focal around call queues and kind of groups of users and potentially some actionable items. So certainly Verify is definitely a multi-platform suite. So as we can see this kind of sample dashboard that I'm sharing right now, there are definitely more than one platform that are shown in a single pane of glass here. That's definitely kind of a buzz key phrase these days, but certainly we can utilize kind of this layout, if you will, for clientele that are maybe migrating away from on-prem call manager to a web-based platform like Webex calling or one of the others that we do certainly support. Now, since today we're going to be more centric around the WebEx calling, and of course, good time for these to refresh in front of everyone. So what I'm going to focus on is going to be the WebEx calling data. Sure, certainly there's all kinds of data elements and data points and KPIs that we can derive with Verify simplistically through either single dashboard widgets or even in the structured reports, but we're going to get into both of them. So we'll come back to the screen in a moment. I'm just going to dive us on over here very briefly to the history section. So in module number 2 within Verify, so the analytics reporting module here, there is a history section that's baked in here for all the platforms, and it's a very powerful usable search function, which I can't over oversell, if you will, because within here we can get very granular at a moment's notice, but also even easily derive reports and export them and send them on their way if there's those kind of one-off requests that are coming down the pipeline from from HR or from legal, as an example. Those are going to be vetted in the manner of seconds. All is going to be needed is maybe a little breadcrumb of information about the call or calls that we're looking to identify and return reports on or find for validity's sake pretty easily. Now, since today's session is going to be kind of encapsulated around call queues and maybe hunt groups and groups, let's just say, I'll pick on call queues to start with. So in the history section here, I do love picking on a good current and previous week just to garner a little bit of data here for us. So there's definitely all viable specific time units and a plethora of relative time unit options as well. Now, for WebEx calling, Verify is definitely using sequence-based reporting. We definitely get down to the event levels or the single, I guess, call legs within a sequence, which this will make sense in a moment. But we do default to sequences. Now, this lab I am showcasing here today, not an overarching amount of field data or true field data, but I'm certainly going to mimic the field with what I have here in this lab. So I'm going to key off of call queues. Um, or I'm going to backpedal a second or so here. So search criteria. Search criteria is just another polished synonym for filters within Verify. You'll see search sets and search criteria. Again, at the end of the day, they're just filters. So the filter or search criteria I've selected is call queue, and we will provide pick lists because we are reading a lot of this information from the Control Hub API so that we can read the users, the call queues, the hunt groups, and a lot of the metadata information that's not natively baked into the call records in their API. So ease of use to leverage Verify in this capacity here. For this call queue here, there were 33 calls that were presented to this finance call queue here during that time frame. So now what we're doing right now is we're just kind of vetting data is what we're doing. So we're just kind of a little exploratory, but investigating is kind of what we're doing. Now, as I made mention before, there are certainly we're going to default to sequence-based reporting. Now, what are those sequences, you ask? Great question. What we're doing with those is we definitely know within the WebEx calling data, there is definitely going to be more than one call event. Every one of these rows that's in this kind of blue shaded kind of background here is an event. So we're characterizing these as events as part of the whole sequence, which is what this has been accordion out for. So we can see calls that are coming in, calls from the external world, where necessarily they're going, who's answering those calls. So this, at the end of the day, is a sequence. Now, there's definitely a lot of data columns and additions that can certainly be added on in here, which certainly I advocate people to go ahead and do such. Over here on the middle far right, this navy blue button of a show hide columns will allow you to add additional visible detail columns into the section. Now, since I'm proctoring this demonstration here, I've definitely put in a whole kit and caboodle here on the right. The box on the right is certainly what's going to be shown out. The box on the left are options that you have. Now, I probably wouldn't recommend just grabbing every one of them. Certainly people can do if they need to, but it could be a little messy. But I've put in the columns I feel that are going to be of need or of choice here for us today. Now, while some may be more beneficial than others, there's definitely ease of use to go ahead and kind of customize and tailor this history section layout by each user ID that has access to the verify instance. So we can certainly just picking on this one right here, we can, pardon me, keying off of that, we can see exactly what happened. Now, this was more or less of an internal call, I suppose, that dialed into this call queue. So let me just slide to the right here a hair, call queue name. So I see the finance call queue, but these, I guess, 5 or 6 maybe top call events that are in the sequence aren't necessarily stamped with a call queue. Well, where'd they come from? Well, it looks like in this case, actually, they were part of a hunt group. So it looks like this auto attendant feeds these calls into a hunt group before sending them over to the another auto attendant to then ring them down into the finance queue to be handled by the operators and staff agents there. The Control Hub API is definitely going to give us all the users that were broadcasted to potentially answer this call. Sure, certainly there's not going to be more than one of them answering the same call at the same time, but we should be able to identify and vet, which agent is actually answering this call. And in this example here, it happens to be Jalen. So we can see who's answering these calls. We can see when calls don't get answered at the queue or at the hunt group level and maybe overflow to another call queue, or maybe there's a voicemail option, or even maybe they hang up while in queue if they were impatient, or if their waiting time in queue was just no greater than what the normal person maybe would expect. There's certainly kind of a grain of salt there with some of that. There's definitely kind of a human kind of intervention with being impatient, let's just say. So now the nice thing from here is we can export these results as well. So a nice, awesome thing what we can employ here is using our start to finish logic, which was previously known as cradle to grave logic. So what we can do here is I'm keying off of just again calls that are coming to with my search filter here of the finance CQ for this time frame. I'm going to enable the history details, but I also want to see what is all going on with these calls? Where are they going? Where are they being routed to? And certainly who's handling them? But again, an exploratory kind of deep dive down the rabbit hole, let's just say. So I did run this before the meeting here, just so we didn't all have to wait for a report to finish. So as an example, this is just another viable option of kind of exploratory data investigation. So again, we saw 33 calls for this March 16 to 26 today time frame for this instance for this call queue. So we have our 33 calls here. Now, the nice piece about being able to turn on the start to finish logic is that I can see everything that was related to this one record if it was part of the call queue, and have advantage to be able to go ahead and click on links and be able to dive deeper into the report and into the data elements themselves. So we can actually see, as opposed to just kind of maybe walking through this section right here and kind of maybe looking at the sequencing in this manner. It's pretty easy to kind of for the look and feel is to export it with this logic turned on, and then you can read top down without any ambiguity and see exactly where these calls went to. Example, that one call, we can see this Carla dials into the auto attendant. We can see that gets routed over to the hunt group, and then after the hunt group, it gets transferred over to the auto attendant for the call queue for finance to be serviced. Again, we see everybody that's rang within this group and list here. There's definitely going to be plenty of not connected records as well. So while one call comes in, it's going to broadcast 20, 30 different agents. There's probably going to be 28, 29 not connected records in that sequence, let's just say, because everyone doesn't have a chance to answer it. Only one person probably does. And again, at this example here, it was Jalen answered this call. So the nice, lovely thing about Verify is we certainly have options to suppress data items as well. So if we didn't want to have all these top zero duration, not connected records inflating our summary counts, we can certainly employ suppression methods to go ahead and curtail that much more intuitively to have the desired results. Okay. So that's definitely one thing I did want to advocate for. Very granular, but also we can make this more interpretable into a report, which we're going to come back to in a moment. But the nice thing about Verify as well, or another nice thing about Verify, there's so many nice things, is that we do have the options between these two modules of dashboards and the structured analytic reporting are very complementary to one another. So as an example here, I think I don't think, I was playing around with this call queue here, and now I've lost my place in line, excuse me. This happens when you resize things. So as an example here, I tailored this dashboard here around this finance call queue and the handlement therein, and everything's all over the place, pardon me. But what we can see is calls that are, again, summarizations of the calls that are coming to the call queues or the system overall. Get out of the way, here we are. Okay. So certainly what we can see is, calls that are coming to the call queues. There we are. Now I've got my place in line. So what I've rendered this around, again, keying off of current and previous week, there's a lot of cool things that we can do with our widget options here. So as an example, I've got two call queues in this in this lab environment right now. I'm really only going to pick on the finance one just because the executive only has the one, but certainly we can identify calls that are coming to all the call queues, kind of give that breakdown of all the call queues, their handlements, their queue times, their average queue times, their abandoned average queue times, answer counts and rates alike, as well as voicemail as well. Now, certainly we can see here for the finance call queue, those 33 calls we were just entertaining in that export report a minute or two ago. Here they are, certainly right here in a summarized view. We can see that 33 calls were queued during this relative time frame here. We can see what their stats were. We can see how many calls were answered. But then, of course, human thought process is always going to wonder, okay, 33 were presented and 30 were answered. Where do those other three go? Well, in this example here, there is a voicemail option on this call queue. So three calls did roll over to voicemail, and they did leave messages. Those are kind of what I would call actionable items. That, in addition to maybe the abandoned calls as well. Now, this lab doesn't have any for this call queue for this time window here, but certainly out in the field, there's going to be calls that are abandoning, and then we're going to have counts off of those as well. Those would be more or less what I would kind of consider some actionable items, so that we can go ahead, or you could go ahead, pardon me, and kind of identify who those callers were, what phone numbers left those voice messages, or which phone numbers were abandoning that would service or need a required callback from the environment. So those would definitely be some actionable items that I would certainly particularly kind of want to see probably my staff entertaining as well. Um, Certainly, we can see what the breakdown for. Now, this is an example of a different kind of a widget here. Same similar widgets. These are grouping summary statistic widgets, just to showcase for the recording and everyone's eyeballs here. So these are out of our 6 widget types. This is a grouping statistic widget. So these will have kind of that table view that you see in the background with a kind of a grouping slice. So whether we're grouping it by call queues, which this one is certainly doing, or whether or not we're grouping by users, which I'm doing here in the second grouping option. So in this widget here, I am keying specifically off of the finance group for the same time window. Yes, we see the same 33 calls here. We can see what the answer rates are there. So those should be pretty identical to what we see up above. But then what we also have then rendering is going to be the user breakdowns. Who are my peak performers? Who's answering the most calls? Now, some people may be thinking, okay, why are the queue counts kind of differ here? Why these are differing is can be based off of agents being logged into these queues where they were optional for a broadcast queued call, let's say. Now we'll pick on this one user down here, this Miss Browning as an example. Of course, good time. There's 9 queued calls here, meaning that she was probably actually is the manager, honestly, probably the manager, and was logged in to potentially help out with any overflow or anything like that, but for the most part wasn't logged in for the full duration like the other users were, like Chame or Jalen or maybe even Willow or Wilson Buck. So there's going to be ease of use to kind of identify that. There's things that we can definitely resort with these widgets as well. So there's a lot of good information here. Definitely kind of time period trending as well, so we can see exactly when calls are coming to these call queues. We do have the nice option to go ahead and be able to clone and copy these widgets as well. So if I wanted to go ahead and make a copy of one here, that's what I wanted that one from earlier. If I want to clone this as an example, maybe I want to see what are my peak hours of day for these calls that come into the environment, again, over maybe a relative time frame. So we can slice this by a different axis time unit, and I'm going to go cumulative by hour of day here. So for these 33 calls, if the lab will play catch up here, okay, we can see that let me zoom in for everyone's eyeballs. We can see here that the high water mark seems to be not 10, but it seems to be 1 p.m. So maybe the just after lunch is when the influx of calls are coming to this call queue is an example. But again, different options to go ahead and lay out the data in kind of different manners as well. We can see also kind of employ our concurrency widget or the utilization widget to also see what is the high watermark over that time frame for the current previous week for calls that are being presented to the environment. Again, I myself personally, I definitely chase down abandoned and voicemail calls as well. Again, just and then kind of build those in different reports or in different dashboard widgets as well, just to identify are there calls that need to be, again, do they warrant callbacks? Is there a repeat caller that's calling into the environment or to this call queue with frequency? So we can certainly kind of build those widgets around kind of that top inbound caller exposure as well, and see, do we have some some problem people that are calling in and maybe harassing the staff, or just calling in, just robo dialing, if you will. So there's definitely ease of use for us to go ahead and identify stuff like that and build that out and kind of identify and provide people with those actionable items as well. Now, these things are fantastic because these dashboard widgets refresh every couple of minutes as time progresses. They can definitely leverage lengthier amounts of time frame. They can even be point at the current day as well, or maybe the current hour if a more real day or kind of current hour exposure is needed for broadcasting this information. Because again, one of the other nice things about the verified dashboards is that we can certainly share them with other application users, but we can also share them out in a read-only capacity with our permalinking. So if I wanted to hand a URL over to a manager after I just gussied up a dashboard like this to be broadcast onto a large television screen, this may be viable for the field, because these are going to be refreshing every couple of minutes. Not to necessarily paint a bad picture on maybe a user or an agent that may not be pulling their weight as an example, or calling out poor performance, but maybe just kind of making a little bit of a competition, so that maybe there's merits for the environment, or some type of rewards for the agents that are answering the most calls, or maybe there's some type of PTO potential they may be able to get for them from themselves for their good performances within the environment. So to each their own. There's definitely a lot of different options for that. If I can hit the right button here, here we are. But again, these are completely read only as well. They are going to refresh. There's nothing that anyone can do that has access to this link can do, except for maybe harm the appearance momentarily. But all anyone would need to do would just be to refresh the browser tab. It'll snap back to its original form with current and live content. Just not going to wait around for it at this moment. Okay. So I think that's a pretty decent gist for, the dashboards, exposure to, to call queues. And we treat the hunt groups exactly the same way. So again, there's going to be broadcasting options for them as well. So we're going to see calls that are coming to, to the hunt groups, whether or not one environment has both call queues and hunt groups, or one versus the other. I definitely see a mixed bag out in the field these days. But Verify is going to be able to provide that level of reportability that is expected from a reporting solution. Okay. So now let's just walk it a little bit into module number 2 here. So I did build a couple quick reports last night for this presentation, and we'll just kind of identify a few of them right now. So again, I was definitely playing around with the finance call queue. So the finance call queue, and we'll just go into the search filters here. I'm keying off of, again, pretty much just a standard filter, keying off of that call queue. I did identify something that did need to be suppressed, but this is just an example of the ability in Verify to go ahead and suppress content that's unneeded for the desired results or the outcome. Meaning maybe this is a manager's extension, or some type of paging service or something like that that doesn't need to be included in the summarized report output. So there's definitely, again, suppression options. But what I'm doing in this report is keying off of the calls that are being presented to this call queue, grouping it by whom is answering it, so the called party name, and then certainly calling on maybe statistical types that we may want to see. Now, there's definitely a long laundry list of options, and we have knowledge base articles on all of this, and have pre-canned reports as well for the Webex calling suite. So we definitely have those in our repertoire. So those are definitely here for us and for you to also go ahead and take advantage of, but not to undersell our support staff as well. But to each their own, to go ahead and select whatever metrics that we need grouped for the agents or the called party name. This is an example, it will be the operators or these agents, and then being able to build out maybe time period based metrics and tables for them as well. Again, there's going to be other options that we can certainly employ, and even including this one, I'm also kind of keying off of some calls that are going to voicemail as well. So if we need statistical options for that, this will be part of my 202 class. But do know there's a lot of ease of use. We can suppress the details if we don't need that level of granularity. That can easily be done. And I should have a mock-up of that hiding around here somewhere. Where is Adobe? Here we are. So on the finance side, again, so we're playing around with those 33 calls as I had made mention and walked through, and the history searches as well as in the dashboard. So again, 33 calls were presented, 30 we know that were answered, so a 90% answer rate, pretty decent. Nothing was abandoned on these examples, but certainly on the field you'll definitely find plenty of that, and those can certainly be chased down as well. Or we can even build out secondary reports to identify just abandoned and voicemail, again, if those do merit actionable items like callbacks. Again, we'll see these calls counts that went to voicemail. That's pretty much our delta here. So the answer of 30, 3 did not get answered. They rolled over to a voicemail, and we're able to go ahead and render that and identify that. I did include this secondarily with a cradle to grave search set, or I guess a start to finish search set, but it is represented here as well. So these are the exact same. But what we can see in here, then again, just like my summary widget, the grouping statistic, seeing who my peak performers are, who's answering the most calls, what are their answer rates, what are their call timers, and all of that fun stuff. But then it can also include breakdowns for the time frame, whether it's by date, by hour of day, week over week, month over month for lengthier time frames as well. So we can show the groups handlement for all the calls that are coming into the environment, as well as the individuals pretty easily with data tables in this kind of grid manner, but also in graphical representation as well. So there's definitely ease of use for those. And again, these are can be kind of extrapolated out of reports and built into dashboard widgets as well, which like we just entertained a few minutes ago. But those are definitely good to haves and definitely things that can certainly be ran on automation. So right next door here in the reports section, certainly reports can certainly be fine-tuned, but definitely right next door they can be built out for automation to be ran on frequency. Do we have any? So there's a couple tests here. So these can certainly be enabled to go ahead and run on hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, biannual, or annual bases for report deliverables. So it's definitely ease of use with that. And I know I'm running a little light on time, but there was one more I wanted to get to. I did throw together a kind of a sales group report that I did just kind of want to walk people through very briefly here. Now, we can certainly do things like this in the dashboard, but also kind of having just maybe a report that kind of, a formalized report that can kind of call out this content as well can be beneficial. So I just mocked something up a few minutes before this call, looking to identify maybe a sales group. So calls that are maybe coming in or out of a certain user group, as an example here. So same time frame, 380 calls, 277 were of the answer variety, but now we have some abandoned calls. We have some voicemail calls. Do those need to be looked at a little more intently? Yes, I have the user listing in the secondary section here, primarily off of the answer counts because the calls that are abandoning or going to voicemail really aren't to blame on on the user group over individually. It's kind of more or less at the on the overall, so the collective, if you will. So yes, same kind of options that we are looking at: breakdowns, charts, data tables, all that good fun stuff. But probably what I would think to do is maybe clone a report like this and actually just focus on only those abandoned or those voicemail calls. So let's just take a quick look at this very briefly. Now, in this report section here, underneath the search sets or filters, I called upon bidirectional handful of users. I just kind of cheated here and just grabbed a lot of a lot of the ones off the top of the list. But looking at them bidirectionally though, so inbound and outbound, but also that employed a scenario type classification anded to that query as well for answer, abandoned, and voicemails. So that is fantastic, and I would definitely encourage people to use this out in the field more often if they're unaware of that, because you can certainly nail down exactly the call types that you're looking to have incorporated in your verify reports as well. And there's definitely inclusion and suppressions around that stuff as well. So what I did was, again, looking at those, abandoned and voicemail calls. So I made a clone. So the copy option, I did copy that. So I have a clone down here, kind of auto inherit space copy on the back end of the report name. But what I did here was I actually took off answered call counts from the scenario type. So to make me only focus on abandoned calls and voicemail calls. So now that output, pardon me, is sitting right around here. So the clone is here. We now of the 103 calls, so that's thusly why the answer call counts and ratios are actually zeroed out. So we see the 25 calls that were abandoned and the 78 that went to voicemail, making up 103. That makes sense to my eyeballs. Well, I would think that we would want to identify, maybe the dates or the time of the day that these are happening from a managerial perspective, just to see, are you understaffed, or were there not enough people in queue, or were there some issues with the call, I guess, thresholds that were coming into the environment and abandoning or rolling to voicemail, if not being able to be serviced by one of the members on the team. Okay, so we're going to be able to build that in here, but what I'm trying to get to is the granularity. So if we needed to, we can embed the very granularity of the call traffic as well. So these calls that are rolling down to voicemail, pardon me, rolling down to voicemail, or that are abandoning, we're going to be able to see, the calling line ID from these callers that probably would deserve maybe a call back by the environment. So if they're missing out on potentially a customer touch point, as an example, or maybe some assistance that maybe a client may need, we can certainly easily render that in those reports as well. And if we needed to turn around and build something like that, that would be corresponding in the dashboard to make it thusly an actionable item. And yes, of course, even that could be automated on scheduled routines to be delivered to the administrators or the managers of the environments to keep everyone aware of the productivity and maybe some of the shortcomings that need some follow-up. Um, I think that's about all I have, and I'm running out of time here. One last thing I always like to make mention, apologies for this, is custom labels. I'm a custom label guy all day, all night. So there's definitely going to be technical jargon that comes out of the box with every platform that we support and verify. So do please know that we can employ custom label sets where we can easily kind of replace columns and grouping types. So if we want to not use the technical vernacular of originating or terminating or caller or callee, we can certainly relabel things that are a little much more polished and more interpretable by the maybe by the non uber technical layman's eyes, let's just say. So where I want to say operator as opposed to called party name and stuff like that, certainly do know that we can certainly replace those with ease. John, I'm about out of content, sir. Do we have any questions?
We don't. One thing I'll interject there on the labels is you can assign those individually to widgets or to report runs, so it's not blanket across your organization. So you can have different label sets for different audiences and so forth.
100% great.